Good evening. Today, as India celebrates the birth anniversary of the father of the nation, the big picture will discuss an extremely pertinent issue. Corruption is so entrenched in the Indian way of life that it's not really surprising when the world looks at us as a deeply corrupt society, unable to instill even a semblance of transparency into our system, political, social, or otherwise. India's politicians have become infamous for their alleged greed, misgovernance, and twin charges of favoritism and nepotism in the affairs of the state. Civil society has lamented over the years the dire lack of honesty and integrity in officials, politicians, the business class, the bureaucracy, and indeed every sphere of life. The irony here is that the lamenters themselves have not escaped charges of misconduct, financial or otherwise. The debate on the big picture tonight will not be aimed at any particular political party, civil society group, business conglomerate, or any particular individual. The aim of tonight's discussion is to raise the right issues, get to the bottom of the cancer that is corruption, and try and answer some basic questions that will form the crux of our discussion tonight. And the question, ladies and gentlemen, is whether the system in our country has failed honest individuals. Is the system so steeped in corruption and misconduct that it has closed all doors for anyone attempting to trot down the straight path? Does the system identify, ostracize, and reject honest politicians? Are we as a society come to be so comfortable with the chalta hai attitude that an upright police officer or an honest bureaucrat or even an act of honesty from anyone in our lives manages to surprise, even shock us? We will look for those answers to all those questions and more on the panel tonight. Joining me will be Bharat Bhushan, senior journalist, Rakesh Batabayal, eminent historian, and Justice J.S. Verma, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. I'd like to start with Rakesh Batabayal, if I could. I think looking at where we are concerning honesty, transparency, and integrity, Mr. Batabayal, petulant would be a mild way of describing how M.K. Gandhi would be feeling. Was he alive today?
No, actually, if you go back in 1940s, Indian society was actually equally corrupt, because the segment with which Gandhiji and others would interact, there were the same questions of bogus voters, misconduct by the politicians. Food supply system was one of the most corrupt system. British military system, the suppliers were some of the most corrupt in the world, not even in India. So actually, when you pass the time, you think that the older times were better.
So the more things change, the more they remain the same.
More they remain the same. But fortunately, for instance, if you go just 10 years back in time and you come back, you see that railway system, for instance, ticketing system, it has improved. It is much more transparent. The public distribution system is much more transparent now. So many things have changed also. But we are talking, today what we are talking about, and Gandhiji would have been himself very quizzed, that the volume of things, the volume that speaks today to us is so big. I don't know whether Gandhi would recognize all these things happening, internet fraud, cyber. So that is the kind of puzzle that we are in. Right. So the web of network, and if you, Gandhiji was concerned about, say, bogus voting in Bengal, the way Netaji was elected through bogus voting. The same thing remains. There's no voting in parties. So some things which have gone worse. But to say that India is the most corrupt in that sense would slightly overstate, because if you talk to any Greek citizen, they will say our politicians are the most corrupt in the world. Italy, nothing moves beyond the mafia. Any business you start, you have to pay to the mafia. So there are corrupt systems, there are corrupt countries. I don't know how, because today we are much more than Gandhi, we are a global citizen.
Right, right.
So we have to see the globe.
What do you think, Bharat Bhushan, do you agree with the line that Mr. Batabayal seems to be taking? Every country has corrupt politicians, and every country's citizens think their politicians are the most corrupt people in the world. Do you agree with that?
I'm sure there's corruption in politics in a lot of places, but what has happened in India, I think, is that as you think, not only the volume has gone up, but several other factors have come in. In politics, I say that, our brain is 4 C's and 1 D. Corruption, caste, crime, communalism, and the D is dynasty.
Right.
And this is a deadly combination, and this nexus today, I don't think it was as strong in 1947. What is worse is that all the educated people today are corrupt. You're not talking about some illiterate who's got elected and is corrupt. These are highly educated people. They're people who have done MBAs abroad and come and, are doing all this thing. And people welcome them. It's not as if people reject these corrupt people. When A. Raja goes to his constituency, he's actually garlanded, and sort of people do his arti. When Suresh Kalmadi, after being released from Tihar, goes to Pune, there's tumultuous welcome for him. So I don't know whether it was like this in the 40s, Dr. Batabayal. I think it's got much worse.
Things have changed. I want to get Justice Verma in on this conversation. Sir, you heard the previous two speakers. My question to you is a little different. Has corruption seeped into our society and our mindsets so much that eradicating it, this disease from our polity, society and daily life, is going to have the same chance? And I don't want to sound pessimistic, but let's say the same chance as a snowball has in hell?
Well, I would like to put it this way. I've heard the two learned speakers who preceded me. Well, in the first place, the volume has increased so much that, to give a crude example, you see, earlier if it was a petty theft, now it is broad daylight dacoity. I mean, earlier if there were dacoits living in jungles, now you see you have people amongst us enjoying the best of benefits. Now, that is something, and people seem to be accepting it as a way of life more out of frustration than anything else. And one big difference which I find, because I was myself, of course, very young, but growing up when the partition came, and at that time there was no dearth for people to have role models who were virtuous. Today, I am shocked very often when I go and meet young people. They ask a very pertinent question. They said, where do we get a role model now? Then another difference which I find is this. Certain institutions, of course, some corruption everywhere was always there. Even Kautilya said in Arthashastra that, well, the fish living in water is bound to drink water. But when it becomes more than drinking water, it becomes storing in huge storage tanks. Well, that's a different thing. So I think the big difference that I see, and that is the reason I consider Gandhiji to be more relevant with every passing day, because his message that it is not materialism, it's not consumerism, but it is what you do for the society and what values you practice.
Right.
He's saying that means are as important as the end. And then what Gandhiji said in Rajendra Prasad also at the concluding session of the Constituent Assembly had said something similar. He said, we have made a wonderful constitution, but the worth of the constitution will depend on the worth of the men who work it.
Justice Verma, I'll come back to you. Justice Verma,
lot of difference.
I'll come back to you, sir. I want to get Mr. Batabayal in. You heard what Justice Verma had to say. We have no role models these days. Who do we look up to?
You know, he's absolutely right, and I come back to it by saying that one of the basic thing that we are actually in a deep crisis is there's no dignity of profession. We are moving into a capitalist system where we have to set up norms. Even to become a good capitalist system, you must have good norms, law and order, everything. So we are perpetually in a crisis situation where we are not able to develop modern capitalist citizenship. So where lies and untruth and all these even invade our business, our norms to each other. So therefore, what is the crisis of role model is that we have not shown any dignity to any professional engineer, professional doctor, professional journalism. So if you don't give dignity to these kind of people who are going to be sustaining your economy, your society, the modern way, large number of people who become role models, so to say, for the young generation have no profession. So no, they're coming from somewhere and huge wealth. So this role model thing actually invades your privacy, invades your thinking. So therefore, what is happening is that there is a complete anomy, a kind of normlessness in the way you conduct your public life. Therefore,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, your public life, and therefore when this huge conglomeration comes where thousands of professionals are vying for attention, you have people who are hogging the limelight, are without any known vocation, without, as you said, caste, communal, all
Right,
this.
right.
And therefore, I am amazed when a newspaper call some of these guys as young Turks. Young Turks, when you go to Turkey, had a vision in 1908 and 9. They had a vision, they had a role model for Turkey. Here, these young Turks actually were fathers or sons and daughters of some politician who had amassed a lot of wealth.
Dynasty, what Bharat Bhushan just said, dynasty is a big D that we have to deal with every day. Speaking of immense wealth, let's go back to 1980s, the whole decade. Now, do you think the shaping of India's policy in that decade, especially during the license quota Raj of the 1980s, did much to damage our attitude as a society towards graft and towards dishonesty? Some people believe that corruption always existed like Dr. Batabayal has just said, and will always exist in countries. But those were the initial seeds of the rampant corruption that we see today. Would you agree with that?
Well, when there are shortages, whether of licenses or whatever, the system will breed corruption. But I'm saying that do individuals exercise no choice? I mean, look at the kind of wealth people have today. You go to Gurgaon. I went to a house where, as you enter the house, there's a wall-to-wall bar of unopened bottles of different kinds of liquor. You go to the basement, the guy is living some fantasy. He's got a pool table, he's got a popcorn machine, a soft drinks machine, and then he's got a mini movie theater with lazy boy sofas, red
something out of a
upholstery.
book, fiction.
Yeah. So what, I mean, you can't blame all this greed on license permit Raj. I mean, somewhere, our families have failed their children, the parents have failed their children, schools have failed their children. There's no inculcation of values that make for a civilized society.
Right. Just as Verma, Bharat Bhushan says, the families are equally to blame. We shouldn't just blame politicians or people looking to make money through unfair means, but families and schools have also failed us. Do you agree?
As a matter of fact, families are to blame first because the values one inculcates from birth. And I have a slightly different view from what the earlier speaker said about, you see, I mean, there being no role models amongst professionals. Personally, I have had the good fortune to know some of the most illustrious people fit to be role models in every profession, even those professions which are not talked of very well, and some of the worst people in the best known professions. So it's not that, but the difference is, earlier, an honest man could walk with his face up and eyes straight. Today, he has become a part of a vanishing tribe and a fast, you see, vanishing or getting extinct.
But why, Justice Verma, why has that happened?
That is the problem, and
why,
that is because...
Why does the honest man stoop and walk?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. No, that he doesn't. He is only scurrying for cover to protect himself, and he continues to walk the straight path. But then you see, the mere fact that the social sanction, which was there earlier against the corrupt, that seems to be waning. Consumerism is on the rise. The gentleman who spoke about the house in Gurgaon he visited, well, that's just a sample. But then those are the people whom you see on page 3 every day and elsewhere. But then a person who has given up a lot for the sake of society, well, he is not given that kind of credit. But it's not that those people have vanished. They are there.
Right.
And that is why my hope continues to be in my faith in the youth. And all that we need to do is to tell them, provide them, and motivate them with those opportunities, because I think the modern youth is capable of turning round the corner.
Right.
The only thing is those who are still there, and they are in plenty. Because today, professionalism has got converted into mercenary trend.
Point taken, sir. Before we go into a break, quick reaction from Rakesh Batabayal. Is consumerism to blame to a large extent? Very quickly.
Let me correct one thing. What I talked about was dignity of profession. That has to be
dignity
there.
of labor.
Dignity of labor and profession as such. But consumerism, we are talking about a huge system that is coming up, and there consumerism is a kind of by default it's located there. So
it's almost a byproduct.
It's a byproduct. Yeah. So how do we sustain this consumerism with a new social order? I think certain new normative horizon has to arrive.
Right.
And we are still struggling for that.
We're still getting there. We'll take a small break. After the break, the big question of the night: have we failed as a society? Has India failed its honest citizen? That's after the break with Bharat Bhushan first. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching The Big Picture. Welcome back to the big picture, the big question, Bharat Bhushan. Have we failed? Has the system in the country failed? Honest individuals, honest, hardworking, industrious, brilliant, meritorious individuals who seem to be finding themselves on the sidelines increasingly owing to favoritism, nepotism and money and muscle power?
The short answer is yes. But we were talking about social sanction. We recently had Shivpal Singh Yadav, brother of Mulayam Singh Yadav, caught on camera telling government servants in the district that it's all right if they made some money as long as they also did something for the public. So there is a sanction from the leadership of corruption. Can I tell my children that they should become like Shivpal Singh Yadav tomorrow? Here's a role model for you. Or become like Mulayam Singh Yadav or Mayawati, who has doesn't think twice before accepting these 1,000 rupee garlands and she poses with. Or can I tell them become like any minister in this government and tell them that become a scamster, make money through by selling natural resources like telecom, airwaves or even coal or whatever. Yet people want their children to be successful. So your notion of success has to be redefined. Does success mean making money by hook or by crook? Or does it mean following a certain straight and narrow path?
Path of dignity.
Of not only of dignity, but of certain morality, of ethics, and being satisfied with that, saying that, look, I tried to do my best, I was true to my values, but this is all I could do. Instead of telling our children that go become, earlier people used to say go become a civil engineer. Now they say go become an IAS officer, go become, within the civil services people are opting more for Indian Revenue Service because of the opportunities it gives you to extract money from people.
Rakesh Batabayal, if a politician wants to clean up the cesspool he sees around him, some people would call it an oxymoron, an honest politician. But if he or she wants to clean up the cesspool and bring some well-intentioned reforms, he or she is regularly seen to be hampered by his own ilk, first of all, his opponents and his surroundings as a whole. Would you agree to that? Would you say that is what happens in our current polity?
Not that he has to. Actually, it is the political class which has to come in and step in to clean up whatever. Because we are talking about a system, a society. A society is not just a system, it's much more than that, it's a life system. I think political class in India, in a democracy where half the population is still struggling to come up, it is the political class which has to take the lead. And I think they are taking leads somewhere or the other. All these area like Right to Information Act and other things are actually in good direction. Actually, what is happening with us talking about the corruption, we always go back and see that the golden age is always in the past, but golden age is always in the future. No matter whichever age you live in, golden age is always in the future, and we are undergoing a crisis situation. So therefore, the political class first thing that they have to do is to connect itself with the institutions within the society, because what is happening is the political class is getting disconnected with the institution. Therefore, a kind of complete demoralization. You see in the Planning Commission how many university teachers are there, Indian university, they are all parachuted. So therefore they are not connected. Once you are not connected, you are not accountable. Therefore, IAS officers, since they are not accountable now to anyone, the proportion or quotient of to become dishonest is too many there. So therefore, once you are connected and you have this vision, because I cannot believe that a political class exists without a vision. Whatever vision you have. So for a good vision, for an honest society, so to say, it is the political class. It has to connect.
Justice Verma, do you agree with Professor Batabayal raised a very important point that people in power, politicians, bureaucrats, all of these people, they suffer from a large, big disconnect to the ground reality, and that's one of the root causes of this rampant corruption.
As a matter of fact, they are primarily responsible for bringing about the change. And one good thing which we see now is greater participation of the civil society. The only thing is, you see vociferous tendencies amongst so-called civil society groups trying to take over the functions of the organs of the state is not the answer. What is needed is pressure groups to ensure greater transparency in the functioning of every public functionary and accountability, for which there ought to be an effective mechanism to enforce accountability of every person. Today, the position we have is, we swear by the rule of law, but then the machinery of the rule of law is being manipulated by people who should be answerable to the rule of law. I mean, that is what has got to change. I am also one of the optimists, and I share the perception of the earlier gentleman. Future, I am very hopeful that the youth will bring about that change.
Right.
Because they have a lot of potential.
Right.
And the unrest amongst them and the zeal for them to do the right thing.
Absolutely.
Just to give an example how much change is there. Talking of professionals, earlier what they contributed to the profession was the yardstick. Today, what is the material wealth they have accumulated? That appears to have become the measure.
Right, so we've taken
now, this has got to change, and I think the youth will bring it.
We've taken two optimistic positions. I think the other cynic on the panel might have a say now. Would you agree with the two optimists on the panel?
Well, you see, I don't believe that this system, can reform itself. I think the system will have to be changed.
The change has to come from somewhere else.
It's lost its ability to take negative feedback, which would stabilize it. Okay, so what has happened is that good politics, ideal politics, politics of the people has moved out of our legislatures. It has moved, it has occupied other spaces. You said RTI earlier. Was RTI, right to information, really a gift that the Congress party gave it to people, or was it Aruna Roy or her activists of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangatna in Rajasthan who fought for it? You take the case of Lokpal. Would Anna Hazare
We'll come to you, Justice Verma, we'll come to you, please.
Without Anna Hazare's movement, would people be discussing Lokpal and accountability in the government the same way that they're doing now? If you take environment, without Chipko and Bahuguna and other leaders there, would there be environmental movement in this country? So this politics has moved elsewhere. Political parties are living in a complete disconnect with what is happening in these new spaces that are opening up in society for politics.
Right.
I expect the change to come from these, these groups and these little movements which are all over the place, which are not yet together consolidated.
Justice Verma, very briefly, sir, we have to answer that point very briefly. Bharat Bhushan said the change has to come from outside. The political class is still living in La La Land.
Well, the politicians will have to change. They have already started thinking, and if the public pressure continues, the participatory role in governance of the people, which we can see, strengthens, which it is bound to because of the unrest amongst the youth. And therefore, ultimately, simply having, as Amar Sen said, virtuous institutions is not enough. Institutional virtuosity is relevant along with, you see, individual virtuosity of the people who man them.
Right.
And that will have to come.
Right, absolutely.
And that is why Gandhiji is relevant today also.
He is, definitely he is. There are no two ways about it. Professor Batabayal, your comment on this.
You see, politics has always been venal. Politics has always been corrupt. Politics, that's why nobody forgave, no politician forgave Socrates. He was given poison. Plato came to politics and said, philosopher has to be, or a king has to be philosopher. Gandhi came to politics and then said it has to be moral. So politics is the nature of politics that it corrupts you. The challenge is, how does that politics change itself, either through outside force or from within, but it is the politics which has to be in the driver's seat. It cannot be conductor, it cannot be anything else, a passenger. It has to drive, and today's crisis in Indian society is a political crisis, and political class has to take control of the driver's seat.
Can it afford a backseat driver in civil society?
You cannot do that.
You can't do that.
No society has so far shown that.
Right, absolutely. I want to ask Bharat one really important point. The media's role in all of this. We talked about if a politician wants to clean up the cesspool, what happens to him or her. Does the media have a role to play in it? Now, given the fact that most private media in the country has commercial interest, Bharat, and usually follows one corporate line or the other, what I'm trying to ask you is this. Do you think the media has a role in labeling, say, Minister X or Chief Minister Y as a failure or a laggard or incompetent if he or she starts stepping on too many toes?
You don't understand the nature of the media. The media in India is controlled by people who share the same worldview as dominant worldview that exists in politics and in the state.
In the polity, yeah.
If they did not share that worldview, that media would stop functioning. So, there is marginal media which will challenge the dominant perspective. But as of now, it is quite ineffective. You tell me, when at a time when media owners want to rub shoulders with prime ministers and ministers and the powers that be, how are they going to take them on?
Right.
You want to be friends with them and at the same time show them a mirror. It's not possible.
Right.
So, you know, media is equally corrupt. We keep on talking about politics being corrupt. You've seen how corrupt the Indian media is. What were radio tapes all about? And that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, right. I want to ask very briefly, Justice Verma, sir, we don't have too much time. What is the way out of this mess, this cesspool? How do we start bringing transparency into our system, our polity, and our society as a whole? I know you mentioned youth power and the change that they can bring, but what are the prescriptions for it?
Well, everyone whose voice counts even today should not remain a silent spectator, because silence is, I think, the biggest sin for people whose voice counts and which can influence the youth and even the elders who are going wrong. And today the problem is, most of the, as Edmund Burke said, nothing more is required for evil to succeed than for the good to do nothing. I am convinced there are enough good people, and people by and large in this country are good, but most of them seem to be have taken this as their fate, and the good ones are not speaking out.
Right. It's not over just as what you're saying.
For them to be effective, for them to be effective, they have to practice what they preach.
Absolutely.
That is another difficulty which we have.
Justice Verma, I must close the show and I give the last word to Rakesh Batabayal. He said it's not just over yet. He still believes that there are good people in the society who can make the change. I have a feeling that you slightly agree with him.
I agree, and the toiling masses are most honest masses, and they give vote every 5 years, every 3 years, every 4 years. So these honest toiling masses will bring an honest political class.
Absolutely.
If this political class has become rotten, they will bring a new space.
On that note, I must end the show. I must thank Justice J.S. Verma who joined us on the show today, Bharat Bhushan as well, and Rakesh Batabayal. Thank you so much for joining us on The Big Picture. Of course, few good men still remain. They can bring the change, but like Bharat Bhushan says, the change has to come from outside, perhaps to some extent from within as well. The political class, we all agree, are disconnected to what's happening with the toiling masses. Like Professor Batabayal put, I think it's not just over yet. Like Justice J.S. Verma has said, we have reason to look forward to. I, for one, was a cynic at the start of this show. Perhaps I might even be an optimist at this end. Athar Khan saying goodbye, good night, and thank you for watching.